Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stober. Now, Nigeria at 58 is a force to reckon with, no matter what. And it still has earned international respect and commendation. Now, the country within these 58 years has experienced challenges such as a civil war, various uprisings, and even bad governance that slowed down growth and progress. Now, the dreaded monster corruption, coupled with insurgency, also affected development. And at a time Nigerians were looking forward to more dividends of democracy, came issues of insecurity, agitations, biased reportage, political upheavals, and such matters that just about put the nation on the boil. Now, some say Nigeria would have been far more industrialized if the second national plan was adhered to. And of course, a recurring question is, how prepared are the citizens themselves to consolidate what gains had been made and build a stronger nation? Now, these are some of the issues we'll be considering tonight on NTA Tuesday Live. But first, let's get to see this report by Timothy Yusuf.
Nigeria's independence in 1960 ushered in the First Republic with Northern People's Congress (NPC), led by Sir Ahmadu Bello, National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon's (NCNC), under the leadership of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Action Group AG, led by Obafemi Awolowo, and Northern Elements Progressive Union (NEPU), with Malam Aminu Kano as its figurehead as dominant political parties. These parties were in control of their regions. The Ahmadu Bello-led MPC was in firm control of the north, the same way Azikiwe's NCNC held sway in the eastern part of the country, while Awolowo's AG was in charge of the western region. The parties did well for their regions in such areas as infrastructure, education, and commerce. But there were challenges of nationhood which lie heavily on the regional tendencies of the parties in their individual control. For many political observers, the central government somewhat seemed to subordinate the regions. The first major challenge of journey to nationhood was the 1963 political upheaval and crisis. As the years went by, the first military interregnum came up, during which the political crisis resurfaced, leading the country into civil war. The situation halted the country's political development for a period of 3 years, during which the civil war lasted.
My advice to these young people is, please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
The military government continued till 1979 through its own checkered reign, which brought in the Second Republic. At the demise of that republic, there was another 15 years of military incursion into the nation's political history, after which democracy resurfaced in Nigeria in 1999 with the Olusegun Obasanjo's administration. From 1999 to date, with President Muhammadu Buhari at the helm of affairs, democracy in Nigeria has had its challenges and vagaries of operations. However, in spite of all this, the experience over the years has shown a ray of hope to Nigerians as a nation that democracy has come to stay, with the people having a greater part of stakeholdership in all sectors of the economy.
It has been 58 years, and we've had our ups and downs, but clearly the future is bright.
Really, when you consider that this is a nation made up of so many ethnic groups, so many interest groups, I must say we've really tried. It's not easy.
It's been wonderful. Nigeria, like every other nation, has our own challenges, but I see us moving past all of those challenges if we decide to work together as one.
In spite of challenges of nationhood still ahead, Nigerians are, however, confident that the system will work for the good of the people, especially in the face of the landmarks being achieved by the Buhari administration.
There's no system is perfect, but actually Baba has already contributed a lot.
If you check for the past how many years, we cannot gather like this. We will be afraid, but as for now, we really thank God and we are happy for that.
Nigerian challenges cannot be solved in one day. We need time. We need patience.
In Abuja, Timothy Yusuf, NTA News.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's introduce our guests to you. We'd like to welcome to this program Chief Philip Asiodu. He joins us from our Lagos Network Center. Now, the older generation will know Chief Asiodu as a diplomat, a bureaucrat, a former Minister of Petroleum, former Chief Economic Advisor to the first executive president of Nigeria. That's talking about President Shehu Shagari. Also a former Chief Economic Advisor to former President Obasanjo. And back then, Chief Philip Asiodu and a few others were referred to as super permanent secretaries. He joins us from our Lagos Network Center. It's nice to see you again, Chief Asiodu.
Very much.
And here in our Abuja Center, we have joining us Senator Adeleke Olorunimbe Mamura, as former Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, a two-time Senator and Deputy Minority Leader, and now Managing Director of the Nigeria Inland Waterways. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We're also joined tonight by General IBM Haruna, a retired soldier, lawyer, a former Federal Commissioner for Information and Culture, and Walin Garkida. Thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. Let me also welcome to this program May Nasara Umar Kogo is lawyer, international affairs analyst on good governance and diplomacy. Thanks for being here, May Nasara.
Happy Independence, Nigeria.
And then joining us tonight is Kenneth Eze. He's spokesperson for #Youth Decide 2019. Thanks for being here, Kenneth.
Thank you, sir.
All right. As usual, we acquaint you with the procedure of this program. At the appropriate time, you can get to be part of the studio discussion. And the platform will be on your screen, so we advise you take advantage of the platform. But again, let me say this, we never get tired of saying it, because once we start the program, it begins to be evident that so many times people may have forgotten the procedure. And that's easily to say when you call in and your phone call gets through, turn down the volume of your TV set. Just reduce the volume so that we avoid the echo or the hurlback. And the best way to know that your call has been passed through to the studio is your name will appear on screen. We say this over and over again. Once your name appears on screen, it means your call is through. Just go right ahead with your comment or question. Don't bother about any greetings. Go straight to the point. And whatever issues you raise, our guests tonight will be only too willing to address them. So welcome once again to NTA Tuesday Live. And tonight it's about Nigeria at 58 years of independence, the journey so far. Let's start off first by going straight to our Lagos Network Center where Chief Philip Asiodu is, and just put the same question to him. What is the general assessment? How would you assess Nigeria after 58 years of independence?
Well, genuinely, for people of my generation and the hopes which were entertained in 1960, not just by Nigerians, but by the world, we have not performed as well as we should, because we had hoped that by 1999 latest, Nigeria would have exited from poverty. We would have done for the black race what the Japanese did for the yellow race under the Meiji Restoration in the earlier century. That hasn't happened, but progress has been made, and we must be happy that against some odds and predictions, we are still one nation with a possibility of still achieving prosperity and greatness and being a pride to the black race.
All right, thank you. We'll return to you in a moment, but let's come back here to Abuja, and then we put the same question to Senator Mamura. 58 years of independence. Yes, Chief Asiodu says it should have been a lot better, but some progress has been made.
Yes, I share that position as expressed by Chief Asiodu. Nation building, it's a process. It's a continuous exercise. And it's not a destination. It's a process. Yes, we have challenges, no doubt. Challenges in the past, challenges even at the moment we are still grappling with. Well, slowly, gradually, we only need to get a bit more serious and a bit more sincere with ourselves so that the same pitfalls we had in the past are not repeated. And then we show greater dedication to issues of nation building.
All right. And the same question will go to the General. How well has the country performed after taking its own affairs in its own hands, 58 years?
Well, interestingly, my understanding of what has happened in the 58 years of our independence started when, in 1958, I started my journey as a cadet into the military profession, which took me into army service for 17 years, 40 years of retirement, 35 years of legal practice. And I think looking back in these years about what has happened in Nigeria, one can conclude that certain developments which have taken place is a yardstick of some progress into modern state civilization. But I feel very disappointed because looking back in those years, of the 58 years, where in 1960 I was a cadet, commissioned 1961, I clearly see three phases of our development which have been very disappointing. The first phase, what I call looting or aberration or corruption, is the phase of seizing political power and therefore stampeding political development. That started from 1966 to 1970 after the Civil War. The second phase is the looting, aberration of the economic wealth and power of the Nigerian state, which started with the promises of the end of the Civil War and the subsequent development plans. Again, this had been dashed because the ruling elite that was evolved after the Civil War and during the course of this development became so obsessed with getting private wealth. And therefore, the aberration and corruption of the Nigerian state came too much in the forefront rather than the development of the Nigerian state. Again, opportunism was taken and complicated the looting of wealth because of the improper implementations of what was planned, like the foreseeable 2020 vision plan, like the recovery plan after the civil service. Then we went into privatization, into the indigenization, deregulation, and so on, where public wealth had passed to private wealth, and corruption became the monster. And today we are faced at a junction, at a critical junction, because the 2019 expected general election is bringing into collusion the Congress of what I have seen in the 3 phases of our development, where the elites, the cabal, who are running the democratic experience have become also the very wealthy elite class, and also the leaders and the elites of the state. They are spread within 91 political parties, and the collusion is about to happen. And it is showing its hand between the conflicts being thrown up in the recent elections in Osun, and even the primaries like the one in Lagos. So we're again in another watershed, and I hope that our elite leaders would put their acts together and see what they can make of the future. Otherwise, our progress so far will also become negative.
All right. You raised so many issues. But now let's see things from the eyes of a younger generation, the new, as they say, the new kids on the block. Mainasara, 58 years of Nigerian independence.
Yes, remarkably speaking, Nigeria has achieved tremendous success. We will not appreciate the quantum of the successes we have achieved unless we juxtapose these successes with 2 points. One, we got serious reversal from the doctrinal philosophy and principles of the founding fathers of Nigeria in 1966. The ideology, the nationalism, the sense of cohesion, the patriotism, the discipline, and the passion for nation building. We succeeded in getting ourselves on a diametrically different course of history from 1966. We would not appreciate this diversionary path as I'm talking about until we reflect back to history. The journey to Nigeria's independence started around 1861 with the annexation of Lagos, subsequent upon which we got formal colonial administration in 1900. Later on, before much earlier than that, we got this scramble for African land, scramble for partition of Africa by the European nations in Berlin, November 1884 to February 1885, where they shared us to the ownership of the colonial masters. We formally got taken over in 1900, and then a few years thereafter, there were a lot of agitations and struggles against colonialism. Jaja of Opobo, Nana of Ishekiri, even King Desemo of Lagos had it tough before he could surrender to them. Sultan Atahiru of Sokoto in 1904, the same thing happened, which terminated the 100 years of the Sokoto Caliphate. Now, thereafter, in 1914, January 1st to be precise, at Logard Hall, Kaduna, the South and the Northern Nigeria got amalgamated into two. But it sprang of the nationalist struggle for Nigeria's independence, as a result of which, to be precise, in 1922, Herbert Macaulay's NDP got into existence. It supported the National Council for Nigeria and Cameroon of Zik. And then they continued the struggle for the independence. They gathered the intelligentsia, the journalists, the nationalists, including traditional rulers and religious leaders. At the end of it, they succeeded in mounting so much pressure to the British colonialists for Nigeria's independence. Even though Herbert Macaulay was not lucky to see the independence during his lifetime, but at least he injected the spirit of that nationalism, patriotism, discipline, and the zest for self-determination in the minds of most of the elites there. Zeke happened to be the most senior in the league after Herbert Macaulay. He integrated all his younger brothers. Sir Amadou Bello, Kewo Mbadwe, Samuel Ladeke Akintola, Chibo Bafemi Awolowo, J.S. Tarka, Aminu Kano, all of them with their different political affiliations. The objective was Nigeria should be independent. We should liberate our people from colonialist domination. They continued up towards 1960 when there were a series of constitutional conferences in London. In 1958, we got something remarkable, the discovery of oil, which changed the economic stay of Nigeria. From the dominance or reliance on agro products, we now got a paradigm shift. We now discovered the black gold, oil. So soon thereafter, there were a series of attempts to get independence. And Ahoro moves it, Akintola moved it. Ultimately, we got the independence. And then these people, because of the thinking for nation building, the unity of purpose was there. Sardauna was asked to become the prime minister by virtue of his position as the leader of the NPC, then the majority party that won the election. He said no. They have somebody there who is a son of a poor man from a village, a minority tribe in Nigeria, who is socially more cosmopolitan than me, intellectually more sound than me. He is somebody who happens to be in the United States and many other countries of the world representing Nigeria, and he participated in the independence struggle more vigorously than me. Let him be there. Let people not give the coloration of my dresses or my aristocratic background to say I want to Islamize Nigeria. Let me remain in Kaduna. He said somebody that he discovered more competent than him to go and handle the challenge. So the patriotism, the nationalism, the spirit of teamwork with which they got independence for Nigeria got eroded completely 6 years thereafter.
Okay.
So that was the beginning of the digression from the Nigeria's attainment of greatness.
All right, we'll return to you. You've captured so much of the history already. Yes. And Kenneth here, well, 58 years, Nigeria's independence. What do you see?
You know, when my elders were talking, it was another reminder of stories, histories we've been told. And these are questions we keep asking ourselves. Sometimes we are tempted not to believe these stories. We are. The present Nigerian youth, the generation I belong to, we find it difficult to actually believe that there was a time when, as we are coming out of the tertiary institution, you know, you already have a place for you. We find it difficult to believe that there was a time when someone, you know, will ask if his neighbors, you know, actually have something to eat before he could think of storing or keeping it for the next day. We find it difficult to believe that there was a time in Nigeria where tongues, colors, all those it does not, you know, when I watch videos of Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Tafawa Balewa, and so many, I feel like there wasn't any difference. What matters to them was Nigeria. I watched a video where Nnamdi Azikiwe was talking. He said, whether it is Tafawa Balewa, whether if it is Awolowo, whether if it is, he said, it doesn't matter who become the leader. So my generation is very worried. We are at a crossroad where we don't know what to believe. And the only thing we have believed is what we are seeing presently. Because we were not born 1960, 1950, all these were histories. And so the question we keep asking is, what came over the present political elites, the leaders of today. How did something suddenly went wrong? To the point that there is no plan for the youth.
All right. Okay. So, and that's the question we'll take up, and then let's go back to our Lagos Network Center and say, Chief Philip Asiodu. Now, there are so many angles to look at it. We've heard the political history of Nigeria getting to this stage. But again, an integral part of the development of this nation was the bureaucracy. As one of those who is referred to as top bureaucrats in what was the Nigerian bureaucracy at that time, was it something that was wrong with what that generation, your generation, bequeathed to the newer people? Or was it that the incoming people deviated from what they were supposed to have done? What was it that changed?
Really, it was, as somebody has said, the demand for independence was a uniting anchor for all the politicians. Whatever the differences, they were determined that Nigeria should be free, and that if we became free, they would perform better. And that really was so. I often tell younger people, in our days, we used our pocket money to pay to go and listen to people like Zeke or Awolowo or the Sadwana. Nowadays, you know how mercenary. Ask people to come to a meeting, they tell you, bring me transport, hotels and all that. But really, in all this we've said, from 1960 to 66, when independence came and our people were running the show, they listened to the established ideas, they talked about them, and it was our duty to try to work out options, practical options. And they really believed, and they had agreed since 1954, that they would have a non-political, independent, merit-driven civil service. And we were recruited into the civil service just as the British were about to go. We went through certain stages of training and so forth and so on. And we tried to perform. Now, what was really very bad, the first two military regimes, that is Ironsi for the 6 months or so he was in power, and General Gawan for the 9 years or so, they kept the civil service, and the civil service performed as a non-partisan group. And if I may just tell you, maybe you all know it, but that from 1960 to 1966, the economy was growing at an average of 6% per annum. Population was growing at about 3%. So there was improvement going on. Then the crisis came and the civil war and disruption. But luckily again, with the preparation for the 3 R's, the 3 R's were rehabilitation, reconstruction, and reconciliation. Worked out again, thanks to the military regime at the time listening, by the civil servants. They came, these were implemented. And thereafter, we did the 1970-74 plan. And from 1970 till 1975, the economy was growing at 11.75% per annum. 10 more years of that, like the Asian tigers, would have exited from poverty. Now, unfortunately, for some reason or the other, the regime which took over from General Gawan decided to make the civil service less powerful, destroy that institution, and compared with what happened in Pakistan, coups or no coups. What happened in India where there was no coup? What even happened in Egypt when Gamal Abdel Nasser, a colonel, took over? He still respected the institutions. There was a massive purge of the civil service without due process. But that apart, also an abandonment of the plans, 1975-1980 plan, which two principal leaders, General Mohammed and General Obasanjo, were actually members of the Gawan government which approved those plans. Those were to lay the basis for diversification, self-sustaining economy. And we had said in the opening paragraphs of that plan that oil is a wasting asset, but we must use it to fund genuine development of renewable resources, which by the destruction of the plan and the abandonment of the plan. But where do we go from there? 2010, as General Haruna said, we had a Vision 2010. Unfortunately, it wasn't implemented. Then 2020, we had the vision. In fact, people like us were involved, broke it into 3 implementation stages. The releases to implement that plan were less than 20% for the critical sectors of infrastructure, education, health, industrialization. Now, as far as I'm concerned, we must, and I've said so in private, I've published it in this thing, we must persuade our leadership, young ones especially, to agree that a country cannot progress if we do not have an agreed national agenda and vision. And we can now do one for 20 years. Where should Nigeria be by 2040? A prosperous country, industrialized, respected. And I tell you that if the coup of 1975 was not so destructive, as I said in my opening statement, by 1999, we would have abolished illiteracy, everybody would have been educated, and the economy would have been diversified. You know, at 10% per annum under compound interest, things double every 7 years. We were already on $1,500 by 1975. Imagine unbroken for another 20 years or 21 years. So we would have, the ancient tigers would have escaped. So there is no, and we were going to have, besides education, which would have abolished illiteracy, a language policy. And this is really important to me. What is a language policy I'm talking about? For instance, if, like now, like it was, your parents speak the same language, you learn mother tongue at home. Wherever you start school, you learn the language there. But the interesting thing I want to see is that by the time you enter JSS 1 at 12 or 13, if you're a northerner in the north, you must choose one southern language. It will be Igbo or Yoruba, which the schools will be equipped to teach you. If you're a southerner, choose one northern language. It will be Hausa mainly, maybe not Fulfulde, Hausa. Which means that, like today's Switzerland, within 15 years, 2 Nigerians meeting, you've gone to good schools together, you have English for international language, and you can speak 2 or 3 Nigerian languages. Will we be talking today about ethnicity and quota and all that? And it is possible. God has given us the resources, and I want a drastic reallocation of how we are spending money. We have enough money, if properly allocated, to pay ministers and legislators properly in accord with the rest of the world, but have enough money to bring up the bottom, give them hope, or we might have a terrible explosion. So it is possible.
Thank you so much for giving us that. So, listening to Chief Asiodu, let's talk about whether it's the politics that has destroyed it. He's made some suggestions, and usually when you hear things said in Nigeria, they say, who will have the political will to? Well, the legislature is an important arm of the political setup. But you also hear all the time that it's one side of it that has suffered the most in the whole makeup. How well has the legislature been?
Well, if I assume that you're throwing a question, whether it's the politics, I would say yes. Because everything starts at the level of politics and politicking in the system. Is all that we've had, certain things are very clear, which I also alluded to in my opening remarks. I mentioned the issue of sincerity. I mentioned the issue of seriousness. Then greater commitment to nation building. Those are critical issues. Now, when you then relate this to the politics of the system or the politicking that we do, because of the nature of our politics, we end up subverting, mark my words, subverting merit. We end up with policy somersault. We've had so many policies. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's any issue that has not been adequately addressed. But we end up with political will not being there. So we cannot achieve. Now, if we now come to the legislature, which I want to believe you deliberately put that to me. Now, I have made this statement several times before, and I'm making it again, that until and unless we fix the legislature, we are wasting our time. Because the legislature, as you said, where we've had so many years of military intervention, and each time the military came on board, the arm of government that will be under lock and key is the legislature. And that tells you the importance, because that is the arm of government that defines democracy. And I don't know what can be done that will not pass through the legislature. So if you don't have a robust legislature where the members of that legislature, whether at the state or the national level, understand why they are there and are ready to commit themselves as members of that legislative body to, again, what was earlier mentioned, shared national vision. There has to be a shared national vision which everybody in the system must commit to. Therefore, when issues are brought, whether, of course, the first thing is representation when you talk of the legislature. As far as I'm concerned, that's the most important role of a legislator, whether at the state or at the national level. You have been elected to represent. So representation is critical. It has to be efficient. It has to be very, very, it has to be done in the proper way, effective and efficient. If you move on to budget, the budget is presented. Of course, it has to be attended to in the appropriate manner to ensure that it's geared towards the good of the people, which is the fundamental issue in governance, the good of the people. You move on, confirmation of appointment. You have candidates being presented. They are not just being presented for the legislators to look at the faces. It is with a view to determining the suitability of that candidate for the assignment being considered. And then you move on, oversight. It has to be, you've appropriated money, you want to follow it up and be sure that this amount earmarked to buy this cup is being used for that. So in all ramifications, the legislature is critical. And of course, the process by which you recruit, the kind of leadership recruitment process, it has to be thorough. It has to be such that the right people with the right knowledge, with the right background, with the right approach are the ones that populate that place. And then you can move on and on.
Okay, thanks so much. We already have a first caller tonight, and calling in from Nasarawa, I believe is still on the line, is Sunday. Sunday's there, go right ahead. Hello, Sunday.
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Hello?
Sunday, you're on. Go
Hello?
right ahead.
Hello, sir.
Yes, go on.
Yes. Hello?
Well, we said
My
at the
name is
start of this
Sunday.
program, once your name appears on screen, you're
Okay.
on. Just go right ahead.
I'm very grateful for this topic that you have brought up tonight. And I say I'm very happy for this topic that is going on. Yes, I'm aware that I'm connected already. And I thank God for this topic that is up. We, the young Nigerians, we are watching, we are seeing, even though we may not have the power to come into the governance, but we are watching and we are seeing. Come to think of, it is so disappointing to see a country like Nigeria where we have everything that a country needs. Country that cannot even measure up to what Nigeria has are doing. Nigeria is doing. I don't have much in it now. I come to think about the National House of Assembly, the Senate. If we want to go forward, they are decamping here, they are decamping there. Is it for bad governance or for continuity in power? They are decamping here, they are decamping there, they are complaining this, they are complaining that. If we want to keep corruption, what does the law that the National House of Assembly and the Senate bring about penalty for anybody who is involved in corruption? When a man sees a fowl or a goat, you see him in prison for life. But people who steal Nigerian funds that are supposed to have built up this country, they are freely moving in the country. And yet now you see them, they fight the president to the court because they have the money. We are very, very disappointed for what we are seeing our leaders.
Oh, dear. Well, we lost that call, but Sunday has just about made a point there. And he's questioning the politics, the system. Are the leaders, are those who are the political elite committed to any serious plan of development? Or his question is, or is it all about self being in power?
Well, my reaction to that is that we have moved on to self-greed being the primary consideration. And therefore, we throw out of the window the realism and the context in which policies are being designed. Looking back at 58 years or so, the youths had the opportunity, and most other professionals, because getting into independence, we were hoping to take over the colonial trained persons in all slots, in the army, in the police, in education, and we didn't have those tertiary educations that prepared sufficiently Nigerians to take over. So there were great opportunities by 1960. But these opportunities, to have them filled, required the training and education, manpower planning, that was necessary to bring about Nigerianization. So there were opportunities already made. But having gotten independence, the issue has become, how have we prepared? As at that time, there were 60 million Nigerians. Today, there are 180 or so called Nigerians. And we found that we have fallen short in our planning, or we have fallen short in having the vision and the audacity to put the appropriate mechanisms for training. I can say that for the military, but for the civil war, we couldn't have developed at the pace we had. We had 8,000 all armed in the army. By the end of the civil war, we were close to 500,000. And the explosion that had taken place also took place in other opportunities or openings in professional fields. We had, I think by the development plans, put training conceptions that would have brought the youth at par and giving the opportunities for adequate participation. But where our policies have failed in context and in relevance to our growth of population and our subsequent need for manpower and materials, has resulted in the frustrations which we now have.
We have a second caller on the line from Eula this time. Adams, I believe, from Eula. Hello? Adam from Eula, are you there?
I'm hearing you. I'm Adam from Yola, and my question is, I'm very happy to see the youth have been involved in this issue, and particularly I want to complain or to tell the issue, especially in our own state, whereby youth have been lived up with hungry, jobless, and something else like that, because especially in our own state, Adamawa state, let me try to use this opportunity and tell you all that our parents that have been working for a long time, that is pensioners, are waiting for their pension and gratuity unpaid, and the youth, they don't have work to do, and especially local government, the grassroots of development where the poor can have that direct opportunity or dividends of democracy, especially in my own local government, had been closed up for more than 2 years and something else like that. So that bad government, that is why the politicians are taking it as an opportunity. They know what to do and they won't do it, because if they leave the people are in poverty and hungry, they are expecting in next coming election they will use the money and buy the vote of delegates and the other that is after they buy delegate vote, and they will be using vote buying and like keep remain in power, and instead of to justify and create job and something for the old people, so that every Nigerian will benefit, especially we at the youth, as we are seeing now.
Okay.
They don't want to give you any opportunity so that maybe you will become somebody with yourself. They are using this opportunity, which is very, very bad. And I want to call our people of Adamawa State, Nigeria, so that when the election of 2019 comes, please stay out from collecting money and selling your vote. If you are selling your vote for me, and I'm been seeing like you are tightening your net with the chain and come and give to somebody that like animals to say that, okay, I'm for sale or something else like that. Even no matter how the situation is, do as the best as possible. Go on.
All right, Adam raising governance issues. Also, in the same vein, raising awareness on how not to sell your vote. But if we talk about governance issues, General, just a moment before I move on to Nasara, this is actually important. If you could just touch on this a few minutes. Now, governance issues, plans were on, and you've heard from the bureaucracy, the legislature, But it's been said that, yes, the military deserves all the accolades for fighting to keep Nigeria united and one. But there are so many Nigerians who would say the same military turned around, shot itself in the foot because of its frequent incursions into governance, and it didn't exactly correct the ills that it said it wanted to correct. And there are those who blame a lot of Nigeria's woes on the military. That's your constituency. How do you see to that?
Well, the way I looked at it, you know, initially when I introduced myself to this subject, we said we had 3 phases of development in this 58 years. And the military discharged itself at the end of the Civil War. But first of all, part of the conspiracy of the Civil War was the looting of political sovereign power, starting with the coup of 1966, because it replaced the bad governance that was about to emerge, brought by the subversion of election, the riots in 1965, followed by the inability of the political leaders to cohere in keeping the country one, and the internal suspicions about the objectives of particular interest in the country. So you can see, because of that, we had a Republican 1963 constitution, which was at the beginning of 1966 turned to a short-term unitary government under Ironsi, followed by the reversal to the 1963 constitution by the military coup, and subsequently during that, the Aburi confederal kind of constitution, which was not endorsed in Nigeria. However, the point is that the military as a whole were brought into the texture of developing a viable constitution for Nigeria. We have survived not because of the military per se, which has been discharging its functions to preserve the integrity and the territory of Nigeria, which is still engaged in. It did not create the crisis of confidence and the conflicts that are going on all over the place. I think that those crises have been brought about because the failure of the Nigerian government to further good governance, as spelled out in Chapter 2 of our Constitution, the welfare and the well-being of the people. Take any issue of policy, the privatization of public assets. It was transferring wealth to private, small interest groups. So wealth has not been created for the generality of Nigerians, but for the group today that I would say are fighting themselves on the democratic front, because they have subverted the genuine liberalization of the people and the creation of wealth. Now we are at another watershed. The military is going to be excluded, and it is excluded, from the context of taking power to promote any form of governance in this country. So thus far, the military has achieved its mission. We are preserving our territorial integrity.
Okay, Minasara, and when you put all of this together, you do hear the word that is said often, and it's called restructuring.
Yes.
Right. What should be done? What is restructuring that you understand? Because that's something that's been bandied around, and it's been said from both sides. Those who are pushing for it, those who are saying tread softly, they all have their own ideas of what restructuring is.
Paradoxically speaking, restructuring is a part of evolution of human development. It's like a human body. You develop by age, your body system changes, your manners, your attitudes, your faculty of thinking, the quality of people you relate with, and the end result of your productivity changes. It's a natural phenomenon. I call it paradoxically because there's a sharp distinction between literal meaning of the word restructuring and the innate intendment of the perpetrators of the concept of restructure. In 1956, late Sir Obafemi Awolowo, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, evolved the Western Nigerian blueprint, developmental blueprint, centered upon the model of education. Education as the weapon for and development of the Western region. Zik evolved his own, centered on industrialization and international commerce. Sir Ahmadu Bello blueprint of 1956 centered on what popularly people call northernization policy. Now, they have communality of purpose. They succeeded in harmonizing all these blueprints, so much so that, like I said earlier on, the quantum of the developments they entrenched within the 6 years. Democracy was only allowed to thrive that time within a period of only 6 years and 4 months. Until then, we didn't get democratic structures rolled back until during the Second Republic. And during the Second Republic, it was only permitted to last for only 4 years and 3 months. The Third Republic, which was a period of delusion, because I call it democratic delusion, because really at the end of it, we did not succeed in even institutionalizing the democratic structures. We got elections from local governments up to presidential level when it was ultimately annulled in June 12, 1993. Coming by what we have seen now, so you discover that the totality of the democratic experience is so minute to have allowed it to germinate into real maturity. But coming back to the issue, restructure, don't start what is impossible. By virtue of Section 14 of the Constitution, we now said that democracy is the fundamental bedrock of our development. If we are talking about that, we should now tailor it with the provisions of the Constitution. Sections 1 and 2 talks about the sovereignty of Nigeria and the indivisibility and indissolubility of Nigeria as a sovereign nation. Now, if it is indivisible and indissoluble, and you want it to be restructured, in what context? If you want it...
Suppose
yes.
the proponents say, okay,
yes,
we've had this in the Constitution.
Yes.
But the various people said, look, we don't want to be together again. Do they have a right to think that way?
You have to respect the provisions of the Constitution. Sections 8 and 9 of the Constitution clearly predicates how you can alter the Constitution, alter the structure, which is practically impossible for you to even achieve it. Because number one, you have to go to the citizenry and get 2/3 of the total number. And first of all, you have to get the total number of the elected representatives of the area desiring restructure. Then you now attach it with a memo to the Senate President, who is the chairman of the National Assembly. The Senate President will now read it and get the consensus 2/3 of the members of the National Assembly in support of that particular submission. On the basis of which, then you now take it back to all the states in Nigeria to have 2/3 of the states. 36 states, 2/3 of which we have 24 states. You have to get the 24 states without one state saying, you have to bargain. If I'm giving you this, what will you give me? You have to see merit in that and get 24 states, after which you now bring it back to the National Assembly, have debate, not debate of voice vote, but debates of real vote casting, and then have 3/4 of the total member of the National Assembly. Then you take it back to referendum. The citizenry now will now go into referendum to get 2/3, by virtue of which, in the history of elections in Nigeria, you have never gotten 2/3 of the Nigeria's population participating in voting. You have never gotten 2/3 of people that are even in the voters register participating in the real election. So, but this, the Constitution predicates that you must have 2/3 of that. Then after which you bring it back to the National Assembly. The National Assembly will deliberate. When they deliberate and get the majority, you take it to the President. The President will call the Council of State. They have to now evaluate it on the scale of national importance, national cohesion, national reasoning, and national interest. So by virtue of which, if it passes, then you now presume that you are getting restructured. But sufficient it be, if it must happen. Okay. Supposing it must happen. There are so many areas that I personally desire restructure. For example, the issue of the revenue sharing formula in the country. We should restructure it in such a way that there is no reason why when we are talking about a federation, you discover that a particular area that has succeeded in producing all the resources that succeeded in developing the foundational structure of modern-day Nigeria. Now you said because you don't have this, you are not entitled to anything. No. The federal government should clearly restructure the economy in such a way that investments will be made for serious mineral resources. We have over 386 mineral resources underneath the sun, the sun, because all mineral resources in the world are in between the desert and the sea, and we have that in abundance. That is one. Secondly, we should restructure our polity. The political structure of 1960 is different from political structure of today. We have taken political system that is too expensive for us to call. Too expensive. In a situation whereby you have less than 1 to 2% of Nigerians enjoying over 80% of Nigeria's resources. It is injustice to the generality of the population, and which is democracy.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll continue on that angle, but for now we'll take a short break. When we return, we will now consider how to turn things around and make sure that the next 58 years it will be leaps and bounds. So stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
Men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or Wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, so plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. The Federal Ministry of Information and Culture bring on this message.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Right. Thanks for staying with us. And it's an interesting night. And the discussions have been going on even while we took that break. But for now, let's go out to talk to the people and get a sample of what Nigerians, the citizens, are thinking.
Nigeria has so many struggles, and I believe with God's grace we'll be able to overcome them. There is no country that's going to have its own struggles.
Yes, we may say that there is a little bit of improvement, but we need to do more.
At 58, we thank God for this country, because what has been happening in other countries that resort to war, that one is not our experience here. So we should exercise patience and support the government and move the country ahead. Believe that tomorrow will be good. They say a Rome is not built in a day, so we should try and support the power that be.
God has created Nigeria as an entity, as a country, and He that has created us to this standard, He will continue guiding us. Peace, tranquility will continue in Nigeria. Division, divided, we are not going to divide. Nigeria will still remain as one entity by the grace of God.
Well, voice of the people, some they are very prayerful. But back here in the studio, the reality of the situation and the many calls for how to address the numerous challenges the country is facing. But again, Kenneth, yes, the youths would say, look, they find it difficult to believe that there was a time when things were not really like this. So what would the youth be looking out for now?
Thank you. The youths will be looking out for the Nigeria we've been told of. The youth will be looking out for a situation whereby you manage to go to school, get your education, as you are coming out, you are gainfully employed. The youths, more especially, will be looking out for a change in the way politics is being played currently in Nigeria, where the supposed leaders of tomorrow are being schemed out. Mark my word. The supposed, we've been told severally. Our dad used to tell you, you are the leaders of tomorrow.
And tomorrow never comes.
Tomorrow never comes, as we are here now. We still see people, who are not ready to leave the scene.
It's been said that no one is going to hand over anything to you on a platter of gold, and you have to work towards taking it. Have the youth come to terms with the fact that they have to get involved and push and do all they can within, legal means to put themselves forward and take this power, because it's been said no one is going to say, just here it is.
That's true. Just like it's been said, power is not being given. You have to go for it. You take it. But I also want you to know that the political elite has a way of, making politics before now. They painted politics in such a way that they don't want the youth to even near it. The youth are only good for thuggeries. The youth are only good to help them carry ballot boxes. Some few youth, minute, population of youth are good for some advisors. It's been interesting to know that even most of the manifestos you see our political elite delivered are being written by us. Yet we are not intelligent. Yet when it comes to the point that leadership position that controls every areas of whatever you are doing, You are a medical doctor, you are an engineer, you are a nurse, you are a businessman. Politics controls everything. One policy will make you or mar you. And that's real thing. The key, the pillar of, that builds a nation where decisions are being made. The youth are not being. Okay, recently, you know what has been happening? When different political parties came up with high exorbitant nomination and expression of inform. The same youth you refuse to empower. So you can see that, really is, we now see it as a ploy to actually, as if there is a conspiracy against the youth to scheme us out.
So the
from
not too young to run act is not something that you're so pleased about, because, like you say, the youths can hardly afford the exorbitant, fees that political parties are putting out there for those who want to participate, and no concessions have been made.
Thank you.
Now, how about the youth taking the bull by the horns and deciding that, look, as a force, as young people, it's time for us to get together and search and not wait for those who have the power now to appoint us as advisors and things like that that you mentioned?
In fact, that is what we have been on. If you check for the past couple of months in the country presently, there has never been a time that the youth are awakened like now.
Okay.
Before now, the story has been some are not interested because of the way I said earlier. They've painted, and we keep asking, if politics is as dirty as you people made us to believe, why have most of you choose to, Okay. So it actually means it's not dirty. And so what you are talking about, the not too young to run came to us with a living hope. We were so happy. But we never knew that there's another plan to scuttle that bill. And the plan was, we now see a situation, 45 million, we see 12 million, we are seeing 25 million. We say, wow. And we know in a normal situation, every father, any father becomes happy when your son, when your child, becomes responsible.
All right.
And so the Nigerian youth look forward for concession.
Okay.
We look forward for, some a waiver.
Okay.
For us, so that we can be able to be parts of what is happening. Because let me tell you that if they continue like this, and maybe tomorrow they are not there, what do you expect us to do? When we're not with them, we didn't learn. So they should be happy that we are interested to learn.
Okay. All right, we'll go back to the phones now. We have from Yola, Ibrahim calling in. Hello, Ibrahim. Oh, well, I think that call has been lost. So let's go straight over to our Lagos Center, where Chief Philip Asiodu is. And yes, we started before the break talking about the concept of restructuring. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, as one who has been so experienced, what is the way forward for Nigeria after 58 years of independence? And what is this restructuring? Are you one of those who are proposing restructuring? And what kind of restructuring?
I believe really that this is a very complicated matter, and our friend has said how many pitfalls on the way. But the point is, first, people talking restructuring are not all speaking the same language. Some are thinking in terms of regions or states which can be financially independent. Others are thinking of restructuring in terms of the revenue allocation. And, but the point really is that, I must say, frankly, whether you restructured Nigeria into 100 states or into 6 zones or 8 zones, if the idea of going into politics is to go and loot and become a member of Forbes list of rich men, we get nowhere. So the whole thing is, how can we begin to have this reorientation? You do not go into politics only for self-interest. Now, but there are a little things we can do now. When people talking restructuring, it's been explained. How do you get 36 states to coalesce into 6 or 12 as was decreed in 1967? And the 1967, if you listen to Gawan's speech, each of the states should be able to discharge the functions of a region. That is, generate enough internal revenue on your own, and this parade every month to go and collect, share the federal revenue would not be there. If we stuck to those principles, no additional state would have been created. So for me, it was tragic going into 19 states, going into 20-something and then 36. And I think under the Second Republic, they were talking about 47 states. All this is just to go and share. It wasn't to create wealth. But if we now do one or two little things, for instance, all serious democracies limit the amount of money you can donate to a party. 2, they limit the amount of money that party can spend. Therefore, going, and in my paper, I did show the relationship of the ratio of the President of America's salary to that of a minimum public sector worker in America. $475,000 to $25,000. It's about 13 to 1. A senator, when we did the analysis in 2010, was already on $212 million. Million naira. If you took his, 37 million constituency allowance per quarter, took the RAMAC allocation, not to talk about the constituency projects, that is 980 to 1. The first thing is, well, it must be a sense of sacrifice. When I remember that when the first post-independence plan was launched in 1962, party or no party, the Prime Minister Balewa, all the regional premiers, Saduana, Akintola then in the west, and Okpara in the east, and ministers took 10% salary cut to trigger the need for savings to develop. With what we have today, I have proposed a salary structure, starting with the president at 35 million naira. Increase the minimum wage to, I don't mind, 600,000 if you like, per annum. Improve salary of teachers. With that, we can get enough money to assure better education so that poor people can have hope. We went to public schools, and my college was public. And from there, we went to the best universities without apology. It isn't so today. But in 7 years, we can change all that. So the thing really is that we must start by agreeing. I had hoped that an elected president would launch the need to get a group, don't need to start from scratch, to formulate a national vision and agenda. Where would Nigeria be by 2040? And by then we should be prosperous, industrialized, no longer poor. It's possible. Now, having got that, then you proselytize on that basis. And you get everybody, as Senator said, to commit to it. So these discontinuities would stop. And then, of course, this sacrifice led by that elected group. But at present, let us take the little things which the Assembly had approved. First, they had agreed to independent candidates. So you don't have to pay 45 million or 20 million. And by the way, the signal was not quite clear. If in 4 years you've increased the price of a firm for a position, what are we saying? Is that position a trading position? It isn't. We must stop that, you know. And if we do that, then for the younger people who are talking, the average, the Nigerians above the age of 60 are less than 10%. You know, people between 20, what is the voting age in Nigeria? Is it 20 or so, 21? And 60. These are really active youth. Are more than 80%. In fact, under 35 are more than 50%. President Obama showed what you could do with social media. Organize yourselves, young ones. I've seen one or two who are serious, competent, well-educated, and idealistic. And when we used to do sociology and politics, it doesn't take 2,000 people in a party. Have a party of 60,000. It ends up with 10 or 5 people bringing the ideas and running it. Get this going. You'll be surprised. You don't have to beg to be recruited into a party. And in any case, what are we talking about? When Zeke produced Renaissance Africa, that was 1937. He was how many years old? 34 years old or so. And all the people who have ruled us, our founding fathers, did what they did as young people. And I am in a group where we've been trying to search. Give us from each state 50 young, idealistic, competent, long-term people, not people who just want everything tomorrow. No. Building a nation takes time, and it can be done. So I think while we are looking forward to the ideal restructuring, there are little practical things we can do now to trigger off independent candidates, limitation to the price of voting, to the price of seeking elections, so it's not a trading position, and teach people. I can tell you, when you do public service properly, God gives you life. If only 1 out of 50 people remember what they benefited from your doing work without knowing them, you'll be comfortable. And comfort is quite easy to reach. It doesn't require billions. So the young people should not feel they have been excluded. Let them organize across ethnicity and all that. And finally, I must say that many of us are grandfathers, and we have children. It will be tragic for us, even when we are dying, to see that the Nigeria is such that one day, if we don't do anything to raise the bottom, there will be an explosion. Many of us will not survive. And even the idea that 15,000 people have already perished from Nigeria in the Mediterranean, when, as the young man said, before we finished our exams then abroad, you've already booked your passage. And when you arrived, there was a job waiting. And for the next 50 years, with the resources we have, Nigeria can continue to grow. And as I said, within 15 years, you can abolish illiteracy, abolish the status of disadvantaged states, go back to merit, competence, and performance as the basis of selection into public office. And Nigeria will be great, and we will not be talking ethnicity. And what is wrong with us dreaming of being a world example where citizens of the two main religions and citizens from different ethnic backgrounds have a harmonious, developed country? This is the sort of dream our political leaders should please articulate, formulate, and evangelize on. And I think we must travel in hope.
We just have one caller. I believe he's still there. Right. Ismail from Kanu. He probably will be the last caller on this program tonight. Ismail, hello.
Hello?
Yes. Thanks for staying with us. Yeah.
Okay. My position on this issue is that our previous leaders, they have tried tremendously. We cannot blame them for what they have done. They have achieved a lot, especially Sadona and Co. But the issue of not too young to wrong, for me, youth, we are deceiving ourselves. Nigeria is bigger than youth. This issue of godfatherism will not allow you to rule this country. All what we need in this country is good leader. We should either youth or elders be the leader that is disciplined and fair, a leader that will make provision for good governance, a leader that can listen to the problem of the citizen. That is all what we should pray for. We should stop deceiving ourselves, not too young to run, and youth, Nigeria is bigger than youth. We should stop deceiving ourselves. Because many of our youth, these criminal of it, they are all behind it. As a graduate, why would you allow politicians to use you? What is the essence of knowledge that you go to university for? Yes, this is the right time. We should sit down, our youth, to think the way forward. Now, seeking for leadership is not the right thing to seek for. We should all what we need to do, we should support our leaders. We should emulate those that have good intention to do good things. We should emulate them to follow them, to support them. It was when we say youth to rule this country, financially, the users already said they are not financially buoyant.
Okay.
What do you expect? And if you are not financially buoyant, you cannot rule this country. Otherwise, we should stop deceiving ourselves. In campaign alone, you even.
Okay, Ismail. Thanks. Well, you made the point. But should it be all about money? Like Ismail is saying, if you're not buoyant, you shouldn't even get involved in running. Should this all be about money, about loads and loads of money?
Well, ordinarily, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Chief Ansiodu talked about the need to regulate and control the amount of money. Already, the Electoral Act has this in place. But it's one thing to have an act or a law. It's another thing for it to be implemented and enforced. So,
for instance, primaries are going on right now. Who knows how much is changing hands?
So these are the issues. These are the issues. So monitoring, regulation, control. These are we have laws. We have acts of the National Assembly in place to really say this is how much you can spend and all that. But who is really monitoring? Who is enforcing and all that? Again, when you run an election, there's no doubt you will have tangible and intangible spending. There's no doubt about that. All over the world, you need some money to be able, but it shouldn't be to the extent of now being the main thing as to skim out some people. The youth, I've had cause to address so many youth fora, and each time I warn that you should not turn this into sloganeering. What you should do as youth is to organize, to network, and strategize. So that, because you have the population, And if democracy remains a game of numbers, then once you can bring yourself together, you'll be able to achieve the goal. But it's not just about, sloganeering. No, it's not. And then you need to, I think it was my Nasara who said earlier on that the revered Sardauna decided to cede, as it were, the prime ministership to Balewa of blessed memory. You see, one of the hallmarks of leadership is the ability to sacrifice. A leader must be able to sacrifice. But if you're not ready to sacrifice as a leader, then you may not even achieve that greatness. So what I'm saying in essence, you recall just recently some of these young presidential aspirants that came together, and then there was an attempt to pick a consensus and all the candidates and all that. The whole thing fell flat at the end of the day. So the ability for you to appreciate that, though, this other person has an advantage over you, one way or the other, in itself is an element of leadership. So what I'm saying is that when the youth themselves decide to come together, you must be able to identify the strength that somebody has over and above and be able to come together and build that front to really fight.
Right. Well, moving forward, how do we turn this 58 years that we've had as an independent, sovereign nation to an advantage as to push forward to see a country where all the ideals that have been talked about tonight would be in place and sustained too? Is it by restructuring?
Well, let me say right away, I'll still come back to what I said before. We need to demonstrate sincerity of purpose.
Right.
We need to demonstrate seriousness. Then, of course, issues of equity, justice, fair play will necessarily come into play in establishing a society that is just. And don't forget, I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. People must have this sense of justice and as opposed to injustice. So that is there. Then we also need, of course, I believe in restructuring. It depends on how you are looking at it. For me, there are three components: political, social, economic. Right. But we may not necessarily achieve this, in one fell swoop. Right. But if you take it from even from devolution, which in itself is part of restructuring, the center is too heavy in terms of what has been given to the center. The exclusive legislative list has 68 items. That is unwieldy. There are so many things there that should not be there, that should just be given to the states to handle. Why should the federal government decide where you are going to sink a borehole, for example? It shouldn't be. So many items there which you can go look at. And of course, I still mention this issue of shared vision, nationally shared vision, that we all can buy into. So it will not matter. Once we all subscribe to this shared national vision, it will not matter who is there. Because we have all subscribed to it, whoever is there will just have to, it's like a blueprint that has to be followed.
All right.
And of course, the issue of education is critical. Very, very critical education. And of course, we need to reduce, if we cannot totally banish poverty, because poverty deprives a man of all virtues. So you need to banish poverty.
All right. General, moving forward.
my take.
Right.
I think that both in our education and in our conversation and policy implementations, we underestimate and talk little about the bottom line, which is money. I think that the accumulation of money in a savage way that deprives a lot of people opportunity is what is going on in this country. We have not talked seriously and addressed the role of banking and money in our society. We find that money is generated, put in the bank, earners put their money in the bank, poor people put their money in the bank, and the bankers and their co-conspirators take all this money and lend it without the necessary securities that will safeguard the depositors. We know we have depositors insurance, but how many banks have fallen through and the poor man has never been raised? And the suspicion also is that not only they conduct this insider business and some criminalities, they do not and have not availed themselves to encourage entrepreneurship by those talented youth that, if properly supported, will create wealth. So the access of money is wrongly based, the security of money and its application to create wealth and keep our youths and professionals at home has not been talked to enough. But I know and I realize that the present administration is starting from the gross roots by giving money to the very low enterprises, market money, traders and so on. But essentially, how many talented graduates can go to the bank and get money and start a meaningful enterprise that will create employment and also create wealth, as has been done in America by those who started a very expensive and expansive wealth today from a garage. I think that the use of money and the creation of money by the banking sector and the abuse of that opportunity should greatly be looked into and reversed so that they use depositors' money to create wealth for the nation rather than create wealth for individuals. And that is what is firing back today as corruption.
Yes, if we want to correct things, we have to borrow from our parents. The First Republic nationalists succeeded by application of Code of Ethics. Samuel Ladeke Akintola succeeded by applying the Code of Ethics of Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther. Michael Okpara succeeded by applying the Code of Ethics of Mary Seleso. Sir Ahmadu Bello succeeded by applying the Code of Ethics of his grandfather, the late Sheikh Udamfodio. In a situation whereby we separate politics from morality, that is where we got it lost. Politics by an average politician is being viewed as an investment rather than a service. You are not better than anybody. You are not better than anybody by virtue of background, by virtue of education, by virtue of age, by virtue of expertise, by virtue of experience, by virtue of anything. You are only a vicegerent of God, given an extrapolation of a minute of God's benevolence for you to balance justice with that. But they are turning it into an instrument of material accumulation. 90% of our modern day politicians do not need the riches they are accumulating. We should call a spade a spade. There is no reason why I should pay millions to buy a form simply because I want to offer a service. And that is the reason why people are looking at it from the commercial angle of the investment. So that when they are getting elected, they now want to go and recoup their investments. And I do not blame them. We have divorced politics away from morality. One of the reasons why United States succeeds is because its motto is, in God we trust. And apart from in God we trust, they practicalize it. An average American man will not tell you something in public for him to change it in secret. An average Nigerian politician, whatever he pronounces in public, is different from what he will do in secret. An average Nigerian would rather, suppose gathers an average of 100 politicians in Nigeria. Fill 3 bags of Ghana must go. One with assorted holy books, either Quran or Bible. The second one with national honors. And the third one with minted bills of money. And ask them to queue and pick one bundle from each of the bags and see which of the 3 bags will get drained down first. We have to be sincere. Politics is all about service. Service by extension is synonymous to worship to God. But that is the opposite of that is what is being practiced. People have already jettisoned the doctrine of patriotism, nationalism, discipline as enshrined in sections 15, subsections 4, subsection 3, and section 14, subsection 3 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. People are only interested in accumulation, accumulation, accumulation. And that is the reason why you see them different from the First Republic politicians. They are always traversing in between different political parties to get where they will be able to get easy, pronto accessibility of money, not really the service. When the president, in his capacity as the commander-in-chief by virtue of section 130 of the Constitution, invoke the provisions of section 15, subsection 5 of the Constitution, that corruption should be fought in all its ramifications. The politicians are seeing that as a big Herculean offense. Rather for that, they are now turning the president to be an enemy. Simply because he said we should go do things in consonance with moral rectitude, in consonance with the extant rules and regulations. There is nothing wrong with our Constitution. There is nothing wrong with our Code of Ethics. Section 24 of the Constitution has talked about national ethics. Section 23 has talked national ethics, 24 absolute national duties. If we are to go by that, Nigeria will be a peaceful and happy place and will attain development. But in a situation whereby 90 kobo out of every 1 naira is going into a kleptonic pocket of private individuals, then we are not prepared for advancement, for development. Politicians as a whole completely need to be re-evaluated. There is a need for general reorientation of politicians so that they should know the meaning of service. Service is akin to worship of God.
Now, in all of this, where would you put the followership? The politicians, yes, the leaders are there. What about the followership? What do they do?
A fish gets rotten from the head. Once you get the head alive, the tail will naturally follow. In a situation whereby they have succeeded in turning the followers as cannon fodders.
All right.
But they have already been pauperized, the followers have been pauperized due to, that is the reason why we have gotten the medal as the poorest country in the world. It is because of inequity in the distribution of wealth, inequity in the application of talents and resources in the nation building. If you have money, that is the A to Z of everything. There is no consideration of morality, there is no consideration of talent, there is no consideration of background, there is no consideration of experience. We have to reorient our philosophy about nation building.
Okay. Well, as we wind down this discussion, the last bit we'll take about is how do we sustain unity and engender peace in the society, and what hope for the future. Another 1 year who probably will congregate in a program like this and talk about the number of years Nigeria has been independent and what efforts to forge ahead. So as we wind down, what should Nigerians think about forging unity and ensuring that peace reigns in the land? There's so much fragmentation now, and people are thinking of where they come from. People are who they are, their ethnic groups, before they think about they're part of this entity called Nigeria.
All that shenanigan is out of sheer ignorance. God did not decide who should be my mother or my father. God did not discuss with me. If God had wished, I would have been a monkey, or a river, or a stream, or a rock, or I would have been a pig. God did not discuss with me at all. If God had wished, I would have been one of the subjects of my father in Garkida there. But he decided to make me from Katsina State. So something that you do not have hand in the determination. And that is the reason why I always cherish India. It is in India you will see their cosmopolitan nature. They are living peacefully, exploiting all the goodies of the diversity they have for the collective betterment of the whole. In India, you will find a situation whereby my father is a Muslim. On Salah day, he brings his cow to slaughter. Probably cow is what I'm worshiping in India. Imagine if he's in Nigeria and he is bringing a cow that I am worshiping. If he can come and slaughter it in my presence, whether there will be peace. But they have succeeded in living peacefully because they do not believe. They take the whole of it. 2,000 years ago or beyond 2,000 years ago, tell me what was the religion of your grandparents. I always give example regarding my own father, what he taught me, a practical example. During the Civil War, there was a chalet. He is a traditional ruler. There was a chalet in his house where he normally accommodated all the resident colonialists and visitors, VIP visitors. He quickly announced all the Igbo people and people from the Midwest should immediately move into the palace. He accommodated them in the palace. He established a church there for them. He said, whosoever would like to come and confront you should deal with me first. He changed his abode to the entrance of the house. He said, you should deal with me first. A leader should be the first to suffer and the last to enjoy.
All right. Okay. So, thanks a lot. So, yes. we'll take the views of Chief Asiodu from Lagos, and then we'll return to Abuja here as we wind down, ensuring peace, unity, and working towards resolving the numerous conflicts that are plaguing the country today. Chief Asiodu. Chief Asiodu.
That we need this total reorientation of attitude. Why do we want to go into politics? We had the example of founding fathers. I told you how, even later, launching the plan, all of them, NCNC, NEPO, MPN, Action Group, took a cut in salary. This need for sacrifice. And I've proposed that if we could agree now, there is enough resources. Just reduce what we are paying some of the top executives and top legislators. We would have enough money to make sure we rebuild quality education and give hope. 1. 2, while we are waiting for the political restructuring, nothing prevents the leadership from formulating this national vision and agenda for 20 years. And let the partisan disputes be who can do it better. But as the Senator Mamora said, if we are committed to a long-term vision and agenda for the country, then we would have continuity. And really, only 15 years of uninterrupted progress will see us say goodbye to poverty, because it takes only that period to abolish illiteracy, reestablish educational structure, make it functional, and people productive. And we have enough resources, minerals, arable land, energy, fossil, renewable energy, and a unique geographical position, 3,500 miles to the markets of Eastern United States and Europe. Asians have to do 11,000, either through Suez Canal or Cape of Good Hope. We should be the first point of outsourcing. So we can have tremendous wealth growth. And as the last speaker was saying, really, my best friends still today are not, anyway, I was never born in my father's town. I was born in Lagos, shipped to Calabar before I became conscious, shipped back to Lagos, etc., etc. During the Civil War, the people with whom I related in the civil service, we still consult almost every week. How can we contribute to arresting this cascade into possible doom and disintegration? You know, and believe it or not, 1968, during the Civil War, we were annoyed with the tardiness in taking decisions in Lagos. I'm a Jordan myself, flew to Jos, quietly borrowed a car from some people making biscuits, drove to Yankari without going to residency or anywhere provincial office. In peace. Nobody killed us. Can I do that today? No. So we must establish all those little things first. And we said independent candidacy, limitation on money for campaigning, money for entering, and this is a fact that you don't need to be approved by a cabal before you become a candidate. You'll be amazed what difference it will make. While we still urge this total reorientation, but it is possible. And with, as I said to you, with a little tinkering with language policy, you will find that in 15 years, you know, whether you came from Borno or Ekpe or Calabar, and you are speaking two languages together, luckily we are one race, it's not white and black, we're one race. I think there should be hope. And I just pray that the present leadership